Unearthed secrets, the terrifying survival instincts of prehistoric humans 1.8 million years ago. The sun had barely risen, painting the sky with hues of crimson and orange when something unimaginable was stirred from the depths of ancient soil. Deep in the rugged hills of East Africa, a group of archaeologists unearthed artifacts that sent shivers rippling through their spines. Hand axes, wrought from sharp stone, lay scattered like the silent remnants of a forgotten battle. These were not just tools, they were the eerie echoes of a world where survival meant relentless danger and every heartbeat echoed with fear. What survival instincts lurked in the minds of those who walked this earth 1.8 million years ago? A peculiar curiosity began to bloom. The discoveries didn't stop at mere tools. The team stumbled upon the skeletal remains of a creature that defied classification. This beast had fangs that could rip flesh and claws capable of tearing through bone. The very sight sent the researchers' hearts racing. Could it have been a predator of unimaginable size, or a nameless nightmare that preyed upon our early ancestors? As chilly winds whipped through the excavation site, tightening its grip on the team's senses, a pit formed in one's stomach as nightmarish thoughts filled their heads. What was it like to live in a world full of such terror? What kind of tactics were necessary to survive when every rustle in the grass could lead to doom? Amid the unsettling atmosphere, they found strange markings etched in the rock symbols that seemed to tell a story lost to time. These hieroglyphs hinted at rituals long forgotten, ancient ceremonies perhaps dedicated to appeasing the gods of the hunt or warding off the spirits of the slain. This raised an unsettling question: were these early human spiritual beings wrestling with their fears, or were they primal creatures driven entirely by instinct? A mix of dread and intrigue churned in their minds as they pondered the possibility that these ancestors had an understanding of death far more profound than anyone had realized. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The tension thickened in the air, and as twilight fell, a strange light flickered just beyond the trees. Shadows danced wildly, casting silhouettes that felt like eyes, watching, waiting. The team exchanged nervous glances, their breath hitching at the thought that they might not be alone. The chilling truth slammed into them: what if remnants of that past still roamed these lands? Would they be brave enough to venture deeper into this forest that had witnessed so many lives lost to the fight for survival? What secrets were still hidden, waiting to be revealed? The sun dipped lower, casting long fingers of shadow that crept like predators towards the ground. The team stood at the threshold of the trees, where the air shifted and the first hints of night crept in, fragmented by the tension among them. Mark glanced at Sarah, whose eyes darted around, wide with a mixture of fascination and fear. "Should we check it out?" Mark asked, his voice almost a whisper. The questions hung heavy, each one suffocating the courage they had formed together over their years of research. Before anyone could reply, an eerie howl echoed through the forest, deep and guttural, leaving them frozen. The sound slithered into their thoughts, conjuring images of the creature they had uncovered earlier. What if it still lived? The legends of this land whispered of beasts that roamed the night. The unearthed artifacts hadn't just been remnants of the past, they felt like warnings, compelling them to heed the call of instinct and flee. "Let us regroup and head back. We'll come back tomorrow in the daylight," Sarah suggested, her voice quivering as worry knotted in her gut. "Just a few steps further," Mark proposed, emboldened by a surge of adrenaline. The flickering light from before tempted his curiosity. There had to be more, a greater truth just beyond the trees. "If we see something, we can document it." Tom, the unyielding optimist of the group, nodded. "It'll be fine. We have flashlights, and besides, what is history without a little risk?" The group hesitantly advanced into the timbered depths, each step sending shivers through their bodies. The faint light drifted through the branches, pulling them deeper into the shadows. The trees loomed above them like ancient sentries, their gnarled roots making the ground uneven, catching on the fears that threatened to trip them. As they approached the glow, an eerie silence fell over them, the forest holding its breath. Then, abruptly, the sounds of rustling leaves broke the stillness. Mark's heart stammered, his hand instinctively tightening around his flashlight. "Did you hear that?" he mouthed, glancing back at the others, his pulse quickening. "It's just a small animal," Tom insisted, though he couldn't quite mask the unease in his tone, but as they turned a corner, the light revealed a large, stone formation emerging from the foliage, a natural altar, perhaps. The intricate carvings that adorned its surface betrayed a time when the skies were painted with the emotions of the Earth's children. The markings seemed to pulse with energy, the weight of history settling upon their shoulders. Suddenly, a rustling crescendo disrupted their awe, and the brushes parted violently. From the undergrowth, a pair of glowing eyes emerged, fixating on them with a chilling intensity. "Back! Run!" Sarah screamed, terror flooding her voice, and in an instant, survival instincts surged. They backed away, but the creature burst forth, a figure shrouded in darkness and muscle, primal and fierce. Its growl reverberated through the trees, a warning echoing through the past and into the present. "What the hell is that?" Tom gasped, paralyzed by fright. They bolted, the sound of their frantic breaths drowned out by the beast's roar. Branches snagged at their clothes. Darkness seeped into their veins, while fear clawed at their hearts. Would they even make it back alive, or were they destined to become just another piece of history? Behind them, the creature surged forward, relentless, a demon from a long-forgotten chapter of this land, hungry for its prey. As they broke through the trees, the ever-present horizon glimmered, yet the fear of the unknown loomed larger. Had they truly uncovered the past, or had they merely awakened something that had always been dormant, waiting for the right moment to hunt? In the chaos of escape, no one thought to look back, not yet. Would they find answers to their burning questions, or would they only find new nightmares? The forest remained restless, the truth still buried, half hidden as shadows danced in the arrival of night. In this quiet chaos, one whisper remained as chilling as the howl that pulled them into madness: "What have we unleashed?" The dim light of twilight was swallowed whole by the canopy as they stumbled into the clearing. Each gasping breath felt like a trickle of lead in their lungs. They were no longer the explorers they once were, they were prey, hunted in a wild, unforgiving world. The silhouette of the massive creature loomed in their minds, sharp and terrifying, as if it were still within reach. "Did we lose it?" Sarah panted, glancing over her shoulder, wide-eyed and breathless. Tom, struggling behind her, shook his head. "I don't know. Just keep moving." His voice cracked, charged with panic. The shadows played tricks on their eyes, each rustle of leaves dragging a wave of terror through the group. They had entered a nightmare of their own making, and the weight of their choices bore down on them. "What about Mark?" Sarah yelled, her heart racing. Fingers shaking, Mark stumbled backward into the thick underbrush, just ahead of the thundering footsteps of the creature. His flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams against the trunks of ancient trees. "I'm fine. Just keep going," he urged as he scrambled to catch up. The forest seemed to close in around them, its dense fabric wrapping tighter as the sounds of the predator grew nearer. A sudden, deafening roar shattered the air. It wasn't just a noise, it felt like the earth itself had screamed. The ground shuddered beneath their feet, forcing the group to halt. Mark's chest ached, a lump forming in his throat as dread filled him. "Why did we come here?" he gasped, dread pooling in his stomach, but there wasn't time for regrets. Tom tugged at Sarah's sleeve, a wild look in his eyes. "We can't stay here. We have to find a way out." A glance into the shadows revealed the beast lurking just out of sight, its breath heavy like a furnace, the whisper of its movement echoing through the darkness. Mark's instincts shrieked at him to run, yet his feet felt rooted in place. The old stories of this land of creatures that were never meant to be disturbed echoed painfully in his memory. "Let us head toward the river," Mark finally suggested, his voice trembling but resolute. "It's nearby. Water, the sound of flowing water. Maybe it'll distract it, or we can hide in the rushes." The thought of inches between life and death sent him bolting forward, leading the others into the suffocating darkness once more. With urgency fueling their legs, they navigated deeper into the woods. The trees twisted above like dark giants, malevolent and watchful. Mark could feel the crack of branches beneath the creature's weight as it remained in hot pursuit. "Keep quiet. It can hear us," Sarah rasped, crushing fear coiling around her throat. As they reached a narrowed path, the sound of rushing water began to fill the air. Relief flickered momentarily, but was quickly snuffed out by the realization that their pursuer still hunted them. Each frantic leap forward felt like a race against fate. The darkness seemed to grow teeth and claws, ready to swallow them whole, but just as they reached the riverbank, a deafening crash erupted from behind. Their hearts raced as the creature lunged, its powerful body crashing through the underbrush. Sarah sprinted ahead, dragging Tom along, but, in a moment of desperation, Mark paused. He turned around just enough to shine his flashlight back through the thick night. To his horror, the beam cut through the dark and illuminated expansive jaws, glistening white teeth dripping with drool and the chilling hunger that resided in the creature's eyes. "Mark! No!" Sarah screamed, pulling Tom away as terror raced through her veins. In that instant, time felt as though it had slowed. The urge to save his friends battled with the primal instinct to run, to survive. He could feel the ground vibrating beneath him as the creature lunged again, deciding the hunt wasn't over. "Run!" Mark yelled, the urgency piercing through the fog of fear. The forest suddenly erupted with the chaotic symphony of failed survival instincts, of feet pounding against the earth and darkness swallowing hope. What would it take to escape not just the monster behind them, but the haunting past they unearthed? The shadows wouldn't let them escape that easily, and as they plunged into the frigid water, everything shifted. Would the depths offer refuge or something worse? The icy water closed over them, a sudden and shocking embrace that stole the breath from Mark's lungs. He gasped, the chill wrapping around him like a vice. But there was no time to linger in shock. "Swim!" shouted Tom, his voice rising above the roar of the water. Mark hardly registered the command as he kicked forward, propelling himself against the current. Behind him, Sarah flailed, the panic reflected in her desperate movements. Mark risked a backward glance, praying they'd gain some distance. The water glistened ominously, but no sigil of the creature broke the surface. For an instant, relief washed over him. The beast's roar was muffled now, echoing like a distant nightmare, yet, their moment of respite was short-lived. "Where are we going?" Sarah's voice trembled, fear inching back in. The river branched, swirling in two directions, one dark and uncertain, the other a glimmering thread illuminated by moonlight. "Downstream. We need to get away," Mark called. He made for the left, the bank rising steeply beside him. "Mark, wait." Sarah panicked, but he wouldn't let fear paralyze him. He could still feel the tremor of heavy footfalls on the shore. Speeding down the rapids, their bodies flung together in the chaos, each twist and turn of the river sent jolts of adrenaline through them. Mark felt his heart hammering against his rib cage, an echoing reminder of the enormity of the hunt still looming in the darkness. Suddenly, something caught his eye, a massive log spanning the river, jutting out like a gnarled finger, inviting and threatening at once. "Over there," Mark urged. "We can climb on." Sarah nodded, lunging for the log just before reaching it. She grasped it, pulling herself up with Tom right behind her. As they clambered atop the precarious perch, a sudden silence blanketed the night, displacing the rushing water sounds with a heavy, ominous hum. It was deafening. "Why is it so quiet?" Tom whispered, his eyes scanning the tranquil stillness. Then, the water stirred violently. They turned, their breath hitching in unison, as the creature breached the river's edge, a hulking figure cast in moonlight, glistening muscles rippling as it moved with purpose. The predator's eyes reflected the natural light, glowing with an otherworldly intensity as it drew closer, low growls rumbling within its chest. "Stay still," Mark breathed, frozen in fear. Every instinct in his body screamed run, but he couldn't abandon his friends. A flicker of movement at the edge of the bank caught his attention. The shadows shifted, revealing not only the beast but something far more chilling, smaller forms shadowing it, darting in and out among the trees. "Mark, what is that?" Sarah stammered, terror edging her voice again as she clutched Tom's arm. The brutal realization crashed down. They weren't alone. The creature wasn't just a single predator, it was a pack, a malevolent family of hunters, ready to lay claim to the unsuspecting trespassers who dared to invade their domain. Mark's mind raced. Escape was becoming more improbable by the second. "We have to get to the other side. Now!" he shouted, pointing downstream where the current roared again. The creature's gaze shifted, focusing on the log beneath them. Mark felt a sense of urgency shooting through him like a lifeline. With a plunge, he kicked off the log, plunging back into the water, pulling Sarah and Tom with him. They fought their way across, splashing desperately, each stroke a fight against the darkness nipping at their heels. The trees along the bank leaned in, the night pressed in like a weight. There was no more time for hesitation, yet, as they reached the bank, a flash lit the air with an unfamiliar shimmer, something metallic among the shadows. Mark stumbled, his heart beat loud in his ears as he caught the reflection of something strange lying just beyond the water's edge. "Mark, look!" Tom called, his voice laced with concern. The emergence of ancient remnants and twisted artifacts sent chills coursing through Mark. They were relics of an ancient time, sentimentally familiar yet filled with dread. What stories lay buried among these remains? "What is this place?" Sarah whispered, her breath hitching as she scanned the eerie artifacts. Then came the low growl, deep and resonant and deadly. The creatures, their jaws gaping open, their hunger palpable, were closing in. "Go!" Mark shouted, fear gripping him hard. But what darkness awaited them at the other side? They pressed forward, propelled by a primal urge to survive. But as they crossed the threshold, the air thickened with the realization that sometimes, escaping one nightmare only leads to another more terrifying truth lurking beneath the surface. The thick fog clung to the ground like a shroud as Mark, Sarah, and Tom stumbled onto the unfamiliar terrain. Adrenaline buzzed in their veins, a stark contrast to the oppressive calm that surrounded them. The remnants of some ancient civilization lay partially buried beneath the roots and debris. Crumbling stone tools, what looked like pottery shards, and rusting metal pieces glistened with dampness in the scant moonlight. "Get away from the edge!" Sarah hissed, instinctively pulling Tom back as he leaned closer to examine a jagged rock, its surface etched with markings that seemed almost alive under the glow. Mark turned, scanning the shadows for signs of their pursuers. Fear gnawed at his insides as the growls echoed painfully close, vibrating through the earth beneath them. With frantic determination, he fought to ground himself in the moment. "We need to keep moving. This place, it's not safe." They hurried deeper into the haunting landscape, where gnarled trees twisted up from the earth, silhouetted against the eerie glow of the moon. The ground felt softer here, as if it held its breath. Mark's instincts screamed at him they were being watched. "Do you hear that?" Tom whispered, and all three froze, the air thick with tension. A low rustle broke the silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of movement, rhythmic and deliberate. Mark raised his head, squinting against the dark as he peered through the underbrush. Shadows danced, and the shapes of lurking predators flashed momentarily in his mind. He tugged Sarah and Tom down, half crouching behind a dense bush. "What if we find some way to fight back?" Tom suggested, his voice cracking under the fear. He looked at the makeshift stones scattered around them. They could be used as weapons, but they were still untested, and hope felt like a brittle thing in that moment. "Like we're the cavemen now?" Sarah's voice was edged with irony, but she kept scanning the area, her breathing shallow. "Exactly," Mark replied, swallowing hard. He couldn't let doubt seep into their hearts. "We can use whatever we can find to protect ourselves." Just before he could finish his thought, a blood-curdling roar erupted from the darkness. The sound clawed at their nerves, and everything instinctively shifted from confusion to sheer panic. They scrambled back further into the shadows, adrenaline forcing their legs to move even as weakness threatened to pull them under. "What now?" Sarah gasped, her voice trembling. Mark's mind raced. He could feel the ground rumbling beneath him. "We need to create a distraction. Maybe if we draw it away from us." Tom grabbed a thick branch and the two began tearing away pieces from the ground. Mark's heart raced as they prepared to throw whatever they could toward the approaching sound. The growl had deepened, and it was closing in swiftly. On 3. 1, 2. But before they could react, a dark shape broke free from the tree line, massive and indistinct in the shadows, yet undeniably there, the creature's luminous eyes glowing brighter. "Run!" Mark shouted, the word barely escaping his lips as they abandoned their makeshift weapons. They dashed into an open space, the thrill of utter survival pushing them faster, but as they fled, a strange rattle caught Mark's attention. There, buried beneath the sprawling roots of an ancient tree, was a mysterious door, half hidden from view but emitting a faint light, beckoning them like a siren. "Wait!" he shouted, heart pounding harder than ever. "What if that leads to safety? Or death?" Sarah spat, her eyes wide with fear. All three hesitated, caught between the predator behind them and the inexplicable allure of what lay beneath their feet. Mark's heart raced, knowing they wouldn't have the luxury of choice for much longer. The creature's growls grew deeper and more menacing, but the strange door was pulling at him, a whisper against his panic. The creature loomed closer, shadows blending with night, and suddenly, they were forced to make a choice. As he felt the creature's breath warm on the back of his neck, Mark glanced back at the door, lost between two desperate paths, each one leading potentially to salvation or doom. What lurked behind that door, and would they be brave enough to venture through it? Mark could feel the heat from the creature's breath, a baleful presence that drove them to make a decision. Time seemed to stretch, the world narrowing down to the feral sounds encircling them and that strange door, glimmering like a mirage in the fog. "Go for the door!" he shouted, the words tumbling out in a frantic urgency. It wasn't just an idea, it was their lifeline. Behind him, a low growl erupted, louder and more menacing, shaking him to the core. "Are you crazy?" Sarah shouted, her voice sharp with panic. "Do you want to get eaten?" Mark fired back, and without waiting for a reply, he bolted toward the door. Heart thrumming, he grabbed the rusted handle, and in that moment, the sound of snapping branches reverberated through the air. Tom and Sarah followed closely, adrenaline pushing them past doubt. They reached the door just as the creature lunged through the foliage. Mark yanked the heavy door open, the creaking sound echoing eerily in the night. A beam of otherworldly light spilled out, illuminating shadows that danced on the walls of their minds. "Go!" he shouted, shoving Tom inside. Sarah hesitated, casting a terrified glance over her shoulder at the thing emerging from the darkness, a hulking silhouette with primal rage glistening in its eyes. They pushed her inside, and the moment they were all engulfed by the light, Mark slammed the door shut. The sound of gnashing teeth and a deep, rumbling snarl echoed against the metal. Inside, the air was thick and dusty, and the space felt impossibly vast. Barred steel shelves rose from the floor, filled with relics and artifacts, their purposes lost to time. Shadows flickered on the walls as if the very memories of the things inside were alive. "What is this place?" Tom whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. "Some kind of bunker," Sarah suggested, brushing her hand against the rough surface of a nearby wall. "No one made this," Mark said, mind racing. "This was built for hiding." The echo of the creature outside grew fainter, yet their hearts still pounded with the fear it had instilled. They huddled close, feeling the weight of the walls around them, as if the bunker itself could also turn hostile. As they stood there, a dreadful realization dawned on Mark. What if it doesn't end here? Whatever is out there won't just give up. We need to find another way out. He stepped further into the gloom, squinting into the dim light. Power still thrummed in the air, this was once somewhere critical. Without warning, a sudden clang echoed behind him. They all turned to see a door at the far end of the room slowly swinging open, revealing a lush underground corridor bathed in an ethereal glow, vines creeping along its edges. "Should we explore it?" Sarah asked, a tremor in her voice. "We don't know what's down there," Tom started, but Mark interrupted. "We don't have any other choice. We can't stay here," he said, resolutely taking the first steps toward the corridor. As they moved further into the underground path, the air grew heavier, thick with moisture and secrets. The sound of dripping water echoed around them, each drop like a ticking clock. Mark felt that familiar sensation in his gut, the feeling of being watched returning in droves. "Do you feel that?" Sarah's voice cut through the tension, shaking and quiet. "Something's down here with us," Tom whispered, his cheeks pale. Just then, a chilling laugh echoed from the darkness ahead, slicing through the stillness like a knife. It was deep and resonant, reverberating through the labyrinthine corridors. The laugh belonged to one thing alone, a predator. "What have we walked into?" Mark mumbled under his breath, dread pooling in the pit of his stomach. As their breaths quickened, they turned to face the darkness. The way ahead was uncertain, shrouded in shadow, drawing them closer to an even deeper terror. Could they outpace whatever lurked in the dark? The corridor loomed ahead, twisting like a serpent. Its walls were damp and slick, glistening with moisture that caught the eerie glow spilling from the doorway behind them. Mark led the way, heart racing, dragging Tom and Sarah along as their footsteps echoed too loudly in the silence. Each step felt heavier, each breath more labored. Time slipped away into the dark, a grotesque honesty looming beneath their feet. The laughter, that haunting sound, had faded, but an unseen presence lingered. They pressed onward, the air thickening around them like a noose. "Maybe it's lost interest," Tom whispered, his voice barely a breath, but Mark didn't share his optimism. Silence stretched between them, heavy and oppressive. A sudden flicker of movement caught Mark's eye. A dark shape flickered at the edge of his vision, just beyond the glow. He turned sharply, but whatever had been there had vanished. "Did you see that?" he asked, pulse quickening. "See what?" Sarah replied, her voice tight, eyes darting about. "Something was just there," he insisted, glancing back down the corridor, but the shadows betrayed nothing. Just an endless path of darkness. They pressed on, but dread twisted in Mark's gut like a knife. They needed to find somewhere safe, or a way to escape, but all the paths seemed to lead further into the abyss. "I think we need to turn back," Sarah said, almost breaking into a run as unease washed over her. "We're only going deeper." Mark shook his head, determination hardening his resolve. "We can't go back. That thing is waiting for us out there. We have to push forward." Suddenly, a loud crash made them all jump. Something heavy hit the floor behind them. Tom turned, eyes wide. "We're not alone. Whatever that laugh belonged to, it could be near." They held their breath, listening, praying for silence, but it was interrupted again, this time by a series of low guttural growls closing in from behind. "Run!" Mark shouted, throwing caution to the wind, lunging deeper into the corridor as fear propelled them forward. They dashed past creepy alcoves, cobweb-covered artifacts lost to time, and what looked like torn paintings of long-forgotten humans clinging to survival. "Right. There's an opening." Tom pointed to a shimmering light ahead. It flickered like a promise of safety, dancing on the walls like a fleeting dream. They diverted and sped toward the light, hope igniting within their chests. As they neared the source, the corridor widened into a massive chamber. The glowing light flooded in, revealing a vast room lined with ancient hieroglyphics and massive stone structures. An enormous, cracked statue loomed in the center, its face long eroded with time. Mark felt pulled by an inexplicable force towards it, the statue's hollow eyes staring down at them, but there was no time to admire the strange sight. Behind them, the growls were louder now, more insistent. The air vibrated with a tension that felt almost alive. "Move, move!" Sarah cried, her eyes wide with terror. They fanned out, scanning for a way to escape. Tom stumbled upon a glowing panel embedded in the ground, pulsing gently. "What if this leads us out?" he shouted, reaching out towards it. Before Mark could react, the chamber erupted with frantic activity. The ancient walls trembled, and the stone statue cracked, threatening to collapse. "Now!" Mark yelled, and all three lunged toward the panel, desperation clawing at their throats. As they pressed down on it, the ground shuddered violently, and the chamber emitted a blinding light that enveloped them. Mark's heart thundered as he felt himself being lifted, suspended in a moment of pure chaos before a terrible roar exploded from the corridor behind them. What was unleashed, they were about to find out. The light was blinding, a searing white that swallowed them whole. Mark felt weightless, the ground beneath him disappearing. He grasped for Tom and Sarah, but their hands slipped away, lost in the brightness. A wave of panic surged. Were they being pulled apart? Then, with a violent jolt, the light shattered like glass, and they crashed back into reality. Mark hit the floor hard, breath gone and chest tight. He blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to his surroundings. They were in a new place vastly different from the stone chamber. It was an expanse of jagged rocks and a stretching sky filled with swirling clouds, a rugged terrain bathed in eerie twilight. A guttural roar echoed in the distance, reminding them that they weren't alone. "Where are we?" Sarah gasped, her face ashen. "I have no idea," Mark replied, pushing himself up. They were alive, but for how long? The not knowing gnawed at him, sharper than any blade. Tom shuffled to his feet, scanning the rocky landscape. "That sound, it's close. We need to find shelter." Panic surged again, and they set off, feet pounding against the dirt. The terrain was uneven, and the shadows danced around them, casting menacing shapes that shifted with every gust of wind. Rock outcroppings rose like ancient sentinels, but none provided a safe haven. Suddenly, a rustle behind them made them freeze. They turned, hearts racing, and watched as a massive silhouette crept into view, a hulking figure with elongated limbs and glistening eyes, its breath steaming in the twilight. The creature let out another terrifying roar, closer now. It wasn't he from old folklore. They were face to face with something very real, something that had risen from their deepest fears. "We can't let it corner us," Mark shouted, instinct driving him forward. He spotted a narrow opening between two large rocks and darted toward it, motioning for Tom and Sarah to follow. They squeezed into the crevice just as the creature thundered past, its form barely missing them. Mark could feel the vibrations in the ground as it stopped, sniffing the air, hunting for them. The stench of wet fur and decay filled their makeshift hideout, mixing with their fear. "Do you think it can smell us?" Tom whispered, his eyes wide, nearly popping from his skull. Mark swallowed, nodding slowly. "We have to stay quiet. It won't get tired. It's built for this." For a moment, they huddled together, breathing in short gasps, trembling as claws scraped against the rocks outside. The growling echoed, deep and menacing. Each pang of fear twisted Mark's stomach, urging him to act, to run, but he couldn't. Not yet. Time passed, seconds felt like hours. Just when it seemed the creature would tire or move on, it let out a frustrated snarl, shaking the ground beneath them. The moment was tense, like a coiled spring ready to snap. "Maybe we can find another way out of here," Sarah suggested, her voice trembling. "If it leaves, we could." Mark wouldn't let her finish. "Wait. Did you hear something?" A new sound, subtle yet distinctive, floated through the crevice. It was faint at first, but growing in echo. Another noise, this one more rhythmic and deliberate, joined it. "Like footsteps?" Tom whispered, eyes narrowing as he strained to listen, but these footsteps were different, heavy, thudding, and numerous. The ground just beyond their hiding spot shook with each step. "Something else is coming. What if it's worse?" Sarah breathed, backing further into the shadows. Mark closed his eyes, pulse racing. The fear locked inside him squeezed tighter. They were trapped between two monsters, one behind and one approaching. Get ready. We may not have a choice. We need to move now. Just as Mark made to shift toward the opening, the ground shuddered violently again, and a loud crash reverberated through the air, shaking their flimsy refuge. What awaited them outside? Desperate to survive, they had to move before time ran out. Could they face whatever hell was waiting beyond? Or had they unleashed something that couldn't be contained? The roar outside intensified, reverberating through the crevices of their rocky hideout. Mark's heart raced as the ground quivered again, yet this time it was followed by a different sound, a shrieking cry, filled with rage and loss. It was as if two beasts were now battling, and the noise wrapped around their frayed nerves like a vice. Mark looked at Tom and Sarah. Fear lit their faces. What if they're fighting each other? Tom suggested, hope glimmering in his voice. Or maybe they're both hunting us, Sarah countered, her whispering voice nearly muffled by the chaos outside. Mark didn't have time to consider their options, he could feel time slipping away like sand. Okay, on 3, we make a break for it, Mark decided, his voice steadying as adrenaline buzzed in his veins. 1, 2. Before he could finish, an earth-shattering roar cut through the air, shaking the very stone around them. Mark's breath caught. The creature that prowled outside wasn't looking for them anymore, it was preoccupied, consumed by its own primal fury. Go! He shouted, diving for the narrow opening, shoving Tom and Sarah ahead of him. They squeezed through the crevice and stumbled out into the unforgiving twilight where shadows danced like mercurial wraiths. The scene before them was chaos. Two giant forms clashed, their snarls mingling with the wind. A flash of teeth and scales, a swirling mass of violence, as the beasts grappled for dominance. Mark's breath hitched. During the briefest moment, it was a spectacle, something out of a nightmare. Run! He yelled, pulling Tom and Sarah farther from the battle, hoping to avoid being caught in the fray. They raced along the rock-strewn ground, every thud of their feet punctuated by the roars behind them. The atmosphere thickened, each breath carrying the scent of fear and adrenaline. The landscape twisted ahead, jagged rocks forming a precarious path. Mark glanced back, the creature still battled as another erupted into twisted light. It was more ferocious than he could ever have imagined, but they couldn't afford to look. They needed to find shelter somewhere the monsters wouldn't reach. Over there. Sarah pointed to a shadowy cave in the distance, half hidden by a large boulder. Mark nodded, determination flooding through him. They raced toward the cave, but as they neared it, a loud crash boomed behind them. A chunk of stone flew into the air, narrowly missing Sarah and landing with a resounding thud just inches from where they stood. Move faster! Mark shouted, his voice laced with urgency. They ducked into the cave just as another roar echoed through the air, one that carried both triumph and primal hunger. Inside, the cool air washed over them. They pressed into the darkness, bodies brushing tightly together, hearts pounding like drums of war. Shadows flickered on the walls, dancing in the dim light filtering through cracks. They could see the outlines of ancient markings scratched into the stone. What is this place? Tom breathed, looking around wide-eyed. I don't know. But we have to move deeper in, Mark replied, his mind racing. Something didn't feel right, as if the cave held memories, stories of those who had come before them. Every instinct told him to keep moving, away from the entrance, away from the monsters fighting outside. They crept deeper, careful not to disturb the dust that settled on the ground like a shroud. Mark stopped suddenly, chest tightening. A low growl rumbled from the depths of the cave, a warning, or something more sinister. We're not alone, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Fear flickered in her eyes as she backed up to Tom, both of them drawing closer to Mark. Shoo, he urged, heart racing. The passage narrowed, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. What waited for them in the shadowy depths of this cave? Before he could think, a pair of glowing eyes appeared from the darkness. They were locked on him. Run! He shouted, adrenaline coursing through him again as they dashed back toward the entrance, the roar of the creatures outside mingling with something far more dangerous behind them. What would they face if they escaped the cave? And would the monsters ever truly let them go? The world erupted in chaos around them. Dust swirled through the cave entrance, caught in a dance of desperation. Mark sprinted toward the mouth of the cave, pulling Sarah and Tom along as the thundering chaos outside acted like a primal drum driving them forward. Every instinct screamed at them to survive, to escape. In the dim light filtering through the cracks in the cave walls, they caught glimpses of the fierce struggle outside. Two titanic creatures stood locked in battle, their growls echoing through the night like an ominous song. Rusted metal from ancient relics mirrored the terror in their eyes, reminding them how fragile life truly was. "We need to stay tight," Mark shouted, the pounding of his heart resonating with every word. "Let us circle around to the left, the woods might give us cover." In moments like these, time blurred like a watercolor painting left in the rain. Each decision felt like a lifeline, and they threaded through the shadows, managing to slip past the chaos still unfolding behind them. Grit dug into their palms as their feet clawed at the earth, each stride echoing with their survival instinct. But then came the fear, the chilling growl of something lurking in the darkness, just beyond the reach of the flickering shadows. "They're coming for us," Tom shouted, panic rising in his voice. His gaze flitted around, searching for the first sign of their pursuer. "Keep moving," Mark yelled, forcing them onward, body thrumming with adrenaline. The oppressive darkness seemed to clutch at their heels, and every rustle sent shivers racing along their spines. As they pushed further into the trees, a cacophony of heavy footfalls followed, mingling seamlessly with the growls of the battling beasts. Blood pounded in Mark's ears, each heartbeat a reminder of his own fragility. He could see the distant outline of the nearby hills, illuminated by the silver light of the crescent moon. "Look!" Sarah cried out, pointing ahead. A narrow path wound through the underbrush, leading toward a clearing bathed in moonlight. "This way!" They dashed down the path, breathless and wild, fatigue creeping into their limbs as they drew nearer to safety. But then they heard a terrifying roar that shattered their fragile hope, louder than before, echoing through the trees like the voice of an ancient god. The ground shook beneath their feet. "Run! Now!" Mark shouted again, launching himself toward the clearing ahead. As they burst into the moonlit expanse, the wild night opened up before them. The silhouettes of trees contrasted sharply against the stars, and for a fleeting moment, they paused, lungs burning, scanning the surroundings. Chaos lay behind them, but in front the glimmer of what could be their refuge. There, nestled in the wild grass, Mark saw a tumbled-down stone wall, remnants of a civilization long past. "That could." Before he could finish, Sarah gasped, her face pale, pointing behind him. Mark spun around just in time to see the massive creature demolish the tree line, its eyes glowing like twin suns, an embodiment of pure predatory fury. "Over there!" he shouted, pulling them toward the wall where they could hide. They pressed themselves tight against the stones, each breath shaky as the reality of their situation seeped into their minds. "What are we going to do?" Tom whispered, fear creeping back in as he glanced over at Mark. They huddled tightly, the adrenaline starting to drain away into raw anxiety. The creature prowled just beyond the trees, sniffing the air, muscles rippling under its dark skin. Mark felt every instinct pushing him to run again, yet they all knew it wasn't about speed anymore. It was about survival. Then came the rasping growls that twisted their insides. The familiarity crawled over Mark, something gnawing at his very core. It was a sound woven with an ancient horror they had come face to face with and were now running from, a primordial instinct recognized far beyond their understanding. "Listen!" Sarah breathed, her voice trembling as she tilted her head, straining to hear. It sounds different." Mark barely noticed until it became undeniable. The creaturesque growling blended dangerously with the sounds of something else, a deep rumble, like rolling thunder, echoing as if the very earth was alive. Suddenly, with a terrifying crash, the ground quaked yet again. Both monsters, the primal and the ancient, were close behind, clashing as they fought for dominance over the remnants of past and present. The ground trembled, and the tattered walls of history around them began to shake. This whole place is coming down. Mark shouted, panic threading through his veins. We have to go. Now. They scrambled over the remnants, racing to the other side of the wall. Just as they reached the far end, a deafening roar shattered the air. Mark glanced back, and what he saw filled him with a primal dread. One of the beasts lunged through the tumbled stones, its jaws snapping viciously. Mark grabbed Sarah and Tom, shoving them forward just as the ancient wall buckled under the weight of survival instincts awakened. The shadows roared, and history couldn't hold its own any longer. Together, they burst back into the night, adrenaline flaring through their veins like wildfire, a last push to free themselves from the past that tried to consume them. Silent screams mingled with their own as the twilight sky loomed above. Through the trees came the sound of branches snapping, the terrible growl echoing in their ears. They had to outrun the past, the carnage, the nightmares that had never let them go. In the distance, the moon hung brightly, lighting a path toward an uncertain freedom. Mark led Sarah and Tom through the wild expanse of forest and ruin, hearts drumming like frantic war drums, echoing deep with a memory of survival that refused to fade. As dawn broke and color spilled into the world once more, a semblance of hope began to blossom. They emerged from the canopy into a clearing, tasting victory at their lips but feeling the weight of what they had experienced. Mark turned to his friends, breathless and wild-eyed. We made it, but the weight of that world behind them pressed heavily still. Whatever they had unleashed would not rest easily, and the whispers of the past would remain intertwined with their future. They had survived, but at what cost? As the sun rose higher, illuminating the ancient land, a single truth echoed in their hearts: they would carry the burden of their experience forever, always glancing over their shoulders, unfinished stories embedded in their minds. The distant roar was a reminder that history was never truly buried but remained lurking, waiting for the brave to awaken it again. Now listen, folks. You need to subscribe immediately so you don't miss the next story that's coming your way. This is the moment to show your support for the channel, so smash that like button now and feed the algorithm. I need to hear from you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support makes all the difference.